strength of a lion, spreading our love with the sounds from Zion. I got the strength of a lion, spreading our love with the sounds from Zion.
Welcome to the Hammer Factor, where we help successful athletes and professionals share their genius with the world. I'm John Grace, your host here at the hot seat, and now it's time to light this fire.
What I know, the trust in myself to accomplish this goal, to make the music that'll spark up your mind, and maybe if you seek it, then you'll find.
In the hot seat today, we have 2017 winner of the Western States 100, previous record holder for the fastest known time on the Rim to Rim Grand Canyon Trail, and dog mom. Welcome to the hot seat, Kat Bradley.
Thanks. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for taking the time. So, where does dog mom come from?
So I have a dog named Shirley. She is a miniature Schnauzer Red Heeler mix, but Shirley is actually named after a dog that I adopted in 2009, 2010. Her name was Maybe, and she was, I was 18 and I went to the shelter looking for a dog, and they were like, she's not a very good dog, and, she bites and she's probably going to die soon, but we're going to euthanize her if no one adopts her. So, of course, she was a full purebred Red Heeler, which are difficult dogs if they're not, tended to. And she was great. She ended up, I named her Maybe She Will, Maybe She Won't, because I had no idea what was going to happen. She turned out to be the best little adventure dog. We got kind of into the outdoor industry together. She through hiked almost the entire Appalachian Trail with me, aside from some sections in Maine. And she was a raft guide with me. She was on the boat with me all the time. And, and then she died in 2015, and it was heartbreaking. And it took me a while to get, till I was ready to get another dog. And then when Ryan and I, my partner, when we adopted Shirley in 2017, we got her as a puppy. She was a rescue. She was, thrown in a dumpster with the rest of her litter. She was also a Red Heeler mix, but she has miniature Schnauzer in her too, and we named her Shirley She'll Be Good after Maybe.
I love that. I love that. Man, it's amazing how a dog can just creep into your soul.
Oh, it's something, that only dog owners understand, and especially people who, do things with their dogs and go on big adventures with their dogs, or, even go through like a hard time with their dog. It's a super special connection.
Man, we could do a whole show on dogs. I think at some point I'm going to have to do that.
I think I tire people out just talking about dogs.
I've had 3 dogs. Luckily, they all lived over 10 years. But I don't know. It's crazy. Just like you have a dog, and it's just the memory of that dog is just cemented with a stage of your life. Like you'll never think about the AT without thinking about that dog.
No, absolutely not. And I grew up with Maybe. I came into adulthood with Maybe, and so that's really special too.
Yeah. Well, let's start from the top. Where are you from? What were you like as a young kid, long before you were a ultra running champion?
Yeah. So I grew up in Hawaii. I'm the oldest of 4, and naturally, the next one is 5 years younger, and naturally, that made me really competitive because I never wanted my sister 5 years younger to beat me at anything. And also just like, I think it's in my nature, my mom is very competitive. All of my siblings are. And I think it's, just a product of where I grew up and maybe, who I was around. But yeah, I grew up in Hawaii. I was a little, beach bum. I grew up spending most of my time in the water, and it wasn't until I was also kind of a little wild child, broke my leg 4 times in between 6th and 7th grade.
You broke your leg 4 times between 6th and 7th grade?
Yeah, I had fallen out of trees, skateboarding down hills, and I just like, and it was, I knew it was going to end up poorly, but I was just, trying, like, someone would be like, "Bet you can't do that," and, my knee-jerk reaction was I couldn't back down, and stuff like that. And it wasn't until I was a freshman in high school where I was just getting in a lot of trouble, and the school, I just like wasn't going to class, and the school was like, well, you have to do something. You have to, like, if you don't join a sport, you can either join a sport or spend the rest of the semester in detention. And it was basically, they were just trying to keep me occupied, and it was a product of being bored and just me acting out. And so I joined the cross country team, and I immediately had a lot of success. And not only that, I found a way to enjoy the outdoors. Growing up in Hawaii, I didn't even realize what I was doing was trail running, but I was, as a young girl, I was training, 7-8 hours a week in the mountains in Kamuala on the Big Island, and and I didn't know what I was doing. I just, it was something I had to do every day, and that definitely solidified who I was as a young woman, and kind of directed my way into trail and ultra running.
How did it work in Hawaii? Did you ever do interstate meets? Did you ever travel to the state at that time to
definitely.
go compete?
You mean to the mainland?
Yeah, to the mainland.
Yeah, so I did the big classic one. So I won states in cross country my junior year, and I traveled to the Foot Locker meet, but I got a stress fracture right after that. I didn't really have a lot of guidance coaching myself, and I didn't have a formal coach in high school, so I just, because there wasn't, it wasn't a big program, and so I just ran myself to death. So I had a lot of injuries in high school, and so I made it to Foot Locker, and I flew over and went, but I didn't race. And then we did the state meet was for cross country was always in Maui, and the state meet for track was usually on Oahu. So
cool. So you ran both cross country and track.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then I either played basketball or wrestled in the off season.
You were a wrestler?
I was a wrestler.
Man, that's so,
Yeah.
I have the opportunity to interview all kinds of athletes, but I gotta say, ultra runners are some of my favorites. Ultra runners are rad people. How was your wrestling career? This is so off topic, but I got to get into this because I wrestled all through college. So.
Oh, did you? So there was no girls team. There were like a few girls from different schools, but no other girl wrestler on the Big Island, let alone a 100-pound girl, so I was wrestling all the boys, and I was practicing with all the boys, and the boys were a lot bigger than me. But I actually, almost by default, made it to states, and I ended up winning states my junior year too of high school in wrestling. And again, like almost by default, I was an awful wrestler. I was just a noodle, and so weak. But it was. I honestly, like, looking back on it, I'm so glad I did it. I hated every minute of wrestling. I hated every minute. I hated wrestling the boys. I hated, I thought they were so gross and stinky. I hated cutting weight. But like, and back then, I think that it's more regulated now, but like, my coach would just give me a bunch of laxatives, 2 days before, and tell me to just eat melons. And so I remember one time, like, I just like went on the mat, and the guy was like, "You smell like literal shit." Like, it's just, and I was so embarrassed, and it was, but looking back, it was fun, and I had a lot of good friends on the team that were like all guys that it's a unique relationship and friendships that I made, and also like it's gotten me, God, you definitely learn how to suffer in a wrestling room when you're sweating it out.
That's so true. It transcends to all sorts of life. That's for sure.
Yeah. And what's crazy is like I I was all, I was a runner, and I thought I had all this cardio on my side, and I thought, I thought it was hot shit, and I went into the wrestling room, and I just in practice, I didn't realize the cardiovascular stress that it's like running a 5K, even though they're only 2-minute rounds in high school. It's like 3 2-minute rounds. And it was so humbling.
Yeah. It's amazing what it takes out of you. So you were a state champion, correct me if I'm wrong, in wrestling, and you were a state champion in cross country. Is this correct?
Yep. And then I won the 800 meter in the state meet too in high school. But again, like I was a big fish in a very, very, very small pond. So when I went to college, again, I thought I was the bee's knees, and quickly I went to UC Santa Barbara and quickly found out that I was, I was nothing but potential and no results. Is that, it almost ended my running career going to, a UC school, going onto the team, being like a star recruit, and then just getting shut down because I couldn't hang, and I didn't know how to handle that.
So how did your running career at UC Santa Barbara go?
Oh man, awful. I I quit the team my sophomore year, and I had to take a step back from school because that a lot of money was invested, and that I had a scholarship for running, and didn't know if I wanted to continue at UC Santa Barbara, and so I took a step back, and that's actually when I hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2011, after quitting the team and kind of finding out or trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I moved to live with my mom on the East Coast, it was a tough awakening, and I vowed to never run again, when I was 19 years old, and it's so hyper competitive, and although I am a very competitive person, I didn't know what it was like to not. I didn't know what it was like to have to work to be the best, or work for what I wanted, and as a runner. And even though I trained hard in high school, it's just like different when you're surrounded by the kind of caliber of athletes that the UC schools recruit, and it destroyed me mentally, and that's nothing but my own fault, thinking, coming in thinking I was ready to hang and ready to not only hang, but have something to prove.
Yeah. So when you quit and walked away from running and went to the AT, what was that experience like? Was that therapeutic and positive? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Excuse me. Yeah. Well, I didn't know I was going out to through hike it when I did. I went out for what I thought was going to be an 8-day backpacking trip, and I didn't know what I was doing. I had only been on like one overnight camping, like backpacking trip, and that was in high school with some friends that I graduated with. We hiked to the top of Mauna Kea, and that was one of the best experiences of my life. And I hadn't done anything since because running had always taken the front seat. And so when I quit, I was working 2 jobs and took some time off to go on an 8-day trip. I was like, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to get back into the outdoors. And, ended up, I spent 8 days out there, and then called my godmother and my mom. And I was like, hey, I talked to some thru hikers, and I was like, hey, I'm going to thru hike this. And my mom panicked. She was like, I will not help you do this. But my godmother, who grew up with my mom, she, was like, let's make this happen. Let's do this. So she, helped me with supplies throughout, drove to meet me, in a few spots in a few states, drove maybe to me, my dog, and, really, and mostly just told my mom that I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And she picked me up at the end, and we drove back to Rhode Island together. And so that was really special, and it was definitely therapeutic, and it was really hard. And I definitely was underprepared, didn't know what I was doing. And the only reason I stayed in the trail is because my mom was sure I couldn't do it. And everyone else like was sure I couldn't. But it was, it was pretty spectacular. I can't, it definitely, to this day, and I forget sometimes how hard it was, but to this day is the best and hardest thing I've ever done for myself.
So you get off the trail, and then when did you decide I'm going to enter a race? How did that transition happen?
So shortly after that, I went back to school and went back to Rhode Island. So that was in 2011. And then in 2013, I went back to Rhode Island, was working during the summer, and just finished school. I just graduated and was kind of looking for something to do. And I was like starting to run again for the first, like I still wasn't running after the Appalachian Trail. I got off and like continued. I kind of immersed myself in the outdoor industry in Santa Barbara. And then got back to Rhode Island and was looking up trails and trail running. And I stumbled upon along this blog that was talking about the north to south route in Rhode Island, which went from the very north part of Rhode Island to the very south, and it's 80 miles. And I was like, I read this blog and I was like, I think I can do this. Meanwhile, I was totally out of shape, hadn't been running at all. Was maybe doing 10K a week at that point, just trying to get back into it. And again, my mom, thought I was crazy, and my godmother's one that crewed me for that. And I went out and did it. I didn't actually finish. I got to mile 40. And this is like, there was no GPS watch or anything. I just like had a Timex and was looking at a paper map and got lost a few times. And I made it 40 miles, and my godmother, and I was like limping in. My godmother was like, okay, get in the car. I support you through anything, but like you look terrible. And that's kind of what kickstarted it. And I quickly after that, I signed up for my first 50K and my first 100 miler in the same sitting, and did my first 50K and 100 in 2013 shortly after that.
Okay.
Or 2014, my first 100. That was Bryce 100. And then, and both were hard, and both same story. I was working full time as a mountain guide and in a restaurant. And I just like, put training on the back burner, and all of a sudden it was June and it was time to run 100 miles. And I was like, well, hopefully the little bit I did is enough, and guts will take me to the rest. And I was actually DFL, dead effing last on the my first 100, and it took me 36 hours.
Did you make the cutoff?
I made the cutoff, just hardly.
Well, I think that's kind of all it takes for the first one.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you decide? Was there a mentor who brought you along, and how did you become competitive? Because in a very short time from this race, finishing dead last, you were winning some of the most prestigious races in the world. How did that happen?
So I was in Winter Park when I moved to Winter Park in 2013, when I just started running, doing trail running. But I was signing up for these races, and again, not training, just signing up. And then and when I say not training, like maybe I was running twice a month. I was skiing a lot, and I was, a raft guide. So like my cardio was really good, but I there's something to be said for actually running. My legs weren't strong. And then I met my partner and moved down to Boulder. When we started dating, I moved down to Boulder, and I was planning on moving down to Boulder anyway. I was like kind of sick of living that seasonal life, because seasonal work is tough, and being a mountain guide and a raft guide is, it's not good money, and it's hard. And it was tough because I was surrounded by just like a bunch of people who drank too much, and all they wanted to do was party. And And that was fun for a little while, but I just got sick of it. So I moved down to Boulder, and that's really when something shifted, because I couldn't go out and ski for my morning workout, before work. I couldn't go out and, hit the raft. So my way of getting outside, instead of being on the raft in the water or, on skis, was running. That was my way of getting outside every day. So naturally I got, a lot fitter, and I have that runner. And, I was always competitive, trying to be competitive in these races. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm just a competitive person. But like when I went from running once a month to, 5 days a week, of course I got a lot better. And of course, and, being around that Boulder community, which is so hyper competitive and so hyper focused, all these guys, a normal afternoon run, is 2 hours after work in Boulder. So, and I was just along for the ride. I was just making friends with Rocky Mountain runners, just trying to meet people. And all those guys are such experienced ultra runners. I was running with my partner, Ryan Lassen, one of the co-founders of Rocky Mountain Runners, along with Ryan Smith and Soke Coaster. Soke, has won several 100-mile races. Ryan Smith, top 10 at UTMB, has won Leadville, and we were all roommates for several years. So we, we lived, trained, ate together, and of course I'm going to get better when my life is revolving around the sport.
Yeah, there's a lot of research out there that says you're the combination of the people you spend the most time around, and if that was your crew, you were probably going to get friends.
I know, and I think having that mountain experience, and through hiking experience, definitely helped me. And then along with my background I specialized in the 800 meters and high school and especially college, and like knowing how to do a hard workout, but also knowing how to be out for 20 hours, because some days on the AT, I was, just because I was cold or I was wet or like was sick of sleeping on the ground, I just would walk. So I knew how to push hard in a workout, and I knew how to be out for a really long time. And I think, that really came together. And ultra running was kind of the perfect sport for me.
So in 2017, you won the Western States 100. Was that your first time entering that event?
It wasn't my first time. It was my second. So I had done, I just missed 1 year by accident, which I did this year too, like an idiot. But I'd entered the lottery after punching my first qualifier. Then I forgot a year, and then I did it again. I entered the lottery in 2016, and I was selected off one lottery ticket, which is like unheard of the year I won. So in 2017, I only entered once, even though I had previously entered before. It was just like messed up because I forgot a year, and
right.
then and your odds go up every year. So I only had one ticket going in, but I only ran Western States once, and I still have only run it once. In 2017, the year I won it.
So walk me through that event. What, for our listeners who don't understand, what is the Western States 100, and walk me through your race?
So the Western States 100 is, often called the Super Bowl of ultra running. It's the oldest 100-mile race. It's also usually the most competitive in the country and in the world. And it runs 100 miles from Squaw, California to Auburn, California, and it's notoriously hot. Like the year I did it, it was, 110, 120 degrees all day. Actually, the year I did it, it was called the year of ice and fire, because the first 30 miles were snow, like literally post-holing, snow up to my knee. And then after that, it hit the top 5 hottest temperatures ever. And it was the hottest ever average temperature from start to finish. So like usually at night when the sun goes down, it cools off a little bit, and that year it didn't. But anyway, so that race, again, I got in off one lottery ticket. I was already signed up for a race that same weekend in Europe, and I wasn't, I entered not thinking I was going to get in, thinking I was just, playing the lottery game. I was going to enter every year. But as soon as I got in, I was excited, nervous, but, I made a commitment. I made a commitment to take running more seriously. And I was teaching kindergarten at the time, and I was, I wanted to win. I trained. I was definitely the underdog, even though I'd had, some good results leading up to it. But in my heart of hearts, I was training to win, and the only people I told were my boyfriend, and my coach, and on that day, it just was. I woke up and I knew I was fit. I have a lot of training partners in Boulder that are women who are also running the Western States that year, and I was pulling ahead in workouts and long runs, and I knew I was fit. I was, fitter than I had been since high school, and I woke up that day and that, I was post-holing through the snow, and I saw, even though I was fit, like post-holing through snow for that long is tiring, and it's so hard mentally, and I was frustrated, and I thought that all that hard work and my commitment to being, my commitment to being the 2017 Western States champ kind of withered for a little while. The snow almost broke me, but the second there was dry trail, I realized I was being kind of ridiculous. And I made a commitment, or made a promise to myself, just a goal, which it's kind of an unreasonable goal in usual circumstances. But I told myself I wasn't going to get past, from then on, mile 30 to the finish by any man or woman. And at that time, I was probably in 7th or 8th place. And I didn't. I had a really steady race, and I just kept going. And I didn't get passed by anyone for the rest of the race, man or woman. And and not, people say that I had a perfect race that day, and I definitely had a good race. I felt good all day. I felt strong, but people, I also really, I also had bathroom issues, and I also had stopped eating at mile 80 because I couldn't hold anything down, and that's just the nature of ultra running. And I think that day I was able to come out of it the toughest, and that's all it is. It's who can be the toughest on that day.
Yeah, it's hard to eat when it's that hot. So at mile 80, you're crossing Ruckachucky, I guess, somewhere around in there.
Yeah, I stopped eating after. So my pacer and I picked up Ryan Smith, who had run Western States the year before, and really quick guy. And again, he was my roommate. We were living together at the time. We ran. So Magda, who is an Olympian and had won Western States 2015, she was running right behind me, and she was maybe 5 minutes behind me at that point at Ruckachucky after we crossed the river. And Ryan Smith told me, we're running every step of this climb. And so we did. We ran all the way up to Green Gate. It's 3-mile climb or something. And that definitely put a gap between Magda and I, but it destroyed, it hadn't gotten cooler. The sun wasn't down yet. And I think that wrecked my stomach, and I just had to stop eating. And that was pretty rough, but I did what I had to do.
Savage. That's so savage.
Well, it helped every time Ryan Smith, every time I tried to hike a hill, he would look at me and say, "Kat, you're better than that." And, he was just such a good pacer, and he knows me so well that he knew exactly what to say when it needed to be said, and no BS.
What was it like going around that track at the end of it? For our listeners who don't know, at the end of this race, there's a high school track that all the runners do, 3/4 of a loop around, and there's usually a pretty big crowd there, especially for the winners. What was going through your head at that time?
It's not so much before the track that really hit me emotionally hard. It's right. So at mile 99, there's this big, it's the last climb of the race, and it's this big, you get off the trail, you pop out on a road, and then you have to climb up to Robbie Point, and it's, a really steep asphalt road, and it goes through a neighborhood, and it just sucks. And it's, you're 1 mile from the finish. And I crested that hill, and I see the headlamps of, Ryan, my partner, and we've been together for 6 years now, and my partner, and Soke is Ryan Smith's wife, and again, we're all living together at this point. Soke is 8 months pregnant, crewing me at Western States,
Oh, cool.
out there all day. I see all my good friend Sean, and Sean and I got into ultra running together, and I see so many people who, like, and ultra running, in itself is such a solitary sport. You train so often by yourself, but seeing, like, cresting those hills, and that hill was hard, and I was like just running away from Magda forever. It hadn't hit me that I was going to win yet, and then I saw those people to run me in, and it was, I haven't thought about this in a long time, and I'm getting teary-eyed because I was like, these people are all out here for me and to see me win.
Yeah.
My best friends, my partner, and it was, people who have become family to me through this sport. So it hit me really hard then, and that, I gotta say, not so much even crossing the finish line, because things are crazy after the track, and it, like, wasn't that enjoyable. You have to sit in the drug testing tent forever, and I didn't get to, like, celebrate with Ryan. But cresting that hill and having those guys run me in was, to this day, probably one of the most special moments of my life, and one of the moments you're like, wow, like, I'm, not only am I doing this amazing, I've just run 100 miles, but I have all these people out here for me, that doesn't happen very often. If it does, realize it for what it is, realize that not everyone has that. Not everyone has all those people.
Yeah, that moment of being thankful. I got cold chills on my arms hearing that story. That's great. That's a long way from the girl who couldn't hack it at UC Santa Barbara track.
Yeah, truly.
Let's switch gears here to the Grand Canyon. Now, what is your relationship with the Grand Canyon?
So I ran the Grand Canyon for the first time in 2014, and I was running with my friend Sean from college, and then he and I got into ultra running together. And Luis Escobar, who's kind of a legend in the sport, and, like, took Sean and I under our wing. And
it's funny you mentioned Lewis, because I interviewed Lewis recently about his snowman race that he's working on.
Oh, yeah. I know. It's such a cool opportunity. I actually was going to do that race, and I'm so bummed it just didn't work out with I was just too worried with all my injuries that I wasn't going to be able to hang. But anyway, so we all went, and I wasn't, I was working so much. This is in the time where I wasn't, training, or I was just, like, going out and doing these big 50-mile efforts and then not running again, another step for 3 months. So, Sean, the night before we do rim to rim, we're all camping out, and I'm planning on only going to the river and back, but we're drinking, and we're drinking tequila, and Lewis, challenges me, says I can't do it. Sean's, like, trying to get me to do it with him. And I agree, and we wake up the next morning at 3 a.m. and start at 4 a.m. and I'm all hungover, still not quite sure if I'm going to do the whole thing. But, I do, and I run it, and it turns out, and that was my first time seeing the Grand Canyon too, was the day I did run trim. And it was the most spectacular thing I've ever seen. And, there are some days that just click, and I didn't suffer for a second on that run. And, it took us 16 hours to double cross it. And it was, I was with Sean and Lewis and a bunch of people from Lewis's Born to Run community that I've, I still stay in touch with and still, treat me like a daughter. And it was that day we were running back from the canyon, and we're running into Phantom Ranch on the way back. We started South Rim, so we're about 35 miles in, and Lewis starts telling me about the FKTs, what they are, and he says, and he, Lewis, he has always known that, if I put myself into it, I could be good. He told me, right when he and I first met, that like I could be a really good ultra runner if I put my mind to it. And he told me that day, I bet you can't go for the FKT. He always knows what I need to go for it. And I said, you just watch me. So from that day, my first time double crossing, I had this goal of setting the FKT in the Grand Canyon. And, I think it was solidified that was, the Grand Canyon. Everything clicked. I ran a 50-mile day because we went up Bright Angel, and I didn't hurt for a second. Every second of it was fun. Took us 16 hours, was loving it. I was trying to race people to the top at the end. And, it was so special. And so I think that solidified the importance of the Grand Canyon to me. And like, I had still one of the best runs of my life that day. And then Lewis challenged me, and then I got excited about it. And so a few years later, Ryan and I, maybe the next year, maybe 2014 or maybe 2015, Ryan and I go out, and I'm totally underprepared. It's my MO. I just started kindergarten teaching job. My first year, and I not training because I haven't figured out my schedule yet. And I am training for like 30 miles a week, and, because I had such a good run that first time, I totally underestimated the effort and what it was like to do in half the time. I totally blew up. Ryan and I went out, Ryan paced me for it. And blew up. It was, there was a lot of things going on. I happened to have bronchitis too. So but I took the weekend, I took time off work. So it was the only time I could go for it. And it was just a total sufferfest. And, that day made it even more important to me. And then I went for it again, in 2017 after Western States. And I was planning on training for Western that fall, the April before Western. I was actually planning on going for it again. And that's where like I was thinking to myself the whole time. I was like, training for Western, I was like, what if I can just get the Grand Canyon FKT, nothing else will matter. And I trained really hard, and there were some rock slides in the Grand Canyon, so I couldn't go for it. It was delayed again. But you know what? I had all that fitness, and without, if I wasn't thinking so hard and focusing so hard on the Grand Canyon, then I probably wouldn't have won Western States or Canyons 100K, which came before Western. And then I went for it again in 2017, the fall of 2017, October. And, again, a lot of things went wrong that day and just didn't get it. And I finally, and with every attempt, there's growing importance. And it becomes this project, just this magnetic force almost that keeps me grounded to the sport. It keeps me grounded to my other goals, and it's when you dream about something every day, all day, from, 2014 to now, the importance just, increases every day. So by the time I got it in 2017, even though I had just won Western States, that was my biggest accomplishment in my eyes. And then a year later, it was, I was kind of struggling with running at that point. I went from like having a full-time job to all of a sudden being a, pro athlete almost overnight. And I was kind of struggling with all the implications of that. And someone got my FKT almost to the day a year later. And I immediately refocused and, refocused on wanting, to go after it again.
So the Grand Canyon Rim to Rim Trail, how describe that trail? What is the elevation, the distance, for our listeners who don't know?
So the official FKT route is, or fastest known time route, is from South Kaibab over to the North Rim and back up South Kaibab. And it's 42 miles, around 12,000 feet of elevation gain, 24,000 feet of change. South Rim, one of the steepest trails I've ever been on. North Rim is more runnable, going up to the North Rim. And then you're running around along the little Colorado River, for or like a little creek for going across the canyon for the rest of in the middle of the canyon. So you're literally running down 6,000 feet, running across, running up 6,000 feet, turning around, down 6,000 feet, across, and then up 6,000 feet. So
Right.
it's when you get to that last 6,000 foot climb, it's certainly it's hard going up South Kaibab after having 34 the fastest miles you can possibly run on your legs is the hardest thing you can do. I think it's so tough.
Now, you talk about the FKT, the fastest known time. How do you break down the purity of that? Can you have pacers? Can you have aid? Can you have crew? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's the FKT for the Grand Canyon is a supported FKT. So when I actually got it, I had Jim Walmsley pace me for most of it. He was coming off 100, so I actually dropped him going out of South Kaibab. And you can have crew too. So he, helped fill up water for me and stuff. But, it's a tough place to have crew too, because the North Rim, if you drive it, is 5 hours away from the South Rim. It's a really big effort or it's a really big ask to have someone drive 5 hours from where you are. So I've had people pace it before. I've never had someone just sit there and crew, but I think that's the way to do it. Having a pacer coming out of South Kaibab is, very helpful if you can get one.
It's a big ditch.
It's a big ditch, yeah. It's a big ditch.
I want to touch on a little bit of what you were saying earlier. So tell me about this moment when you kind of came out of nowhere, really, winning the Western States, having what they call the perfect race, setting this FKT. All of a sudden, you're getting approached by sponsors. How did all that transition happen for you?
So I wouldn't quite say I came out of nowhere. I think the other women that were gunning for top 20 were certainly aware that I was racing. I'd just come off a win at Canyons, 100K. Where I'd gotten Magda's course record, who Magda was a previous winner of Western, and I'd won Rio de Lago, and gotten a course record there. And, so I didn't come out of nowhere, and Salomon was, I was already an ambassador for Salomon, and they were giving me support, race support. And, the people who were racing, the women who were racing definitely knew who I was, but it wasn't a priority it was a priority. I was training to win Western, but it wasn't my whole life. I was working a full-time job too. But I got laid off. I found out I wasn't going to be teaching the next year in March. And so I finished out the school year with my kindergartners, and all of a sudden, and then won Western State shortly after that. And then all of a sudden, come around and I was fine. I had a great summer after that. But come August, when I'm supposed to be back in school, all of a sudden I don't have a 9-to-5, and I don't know what to do. It was too much time. I was taking Shirley on too many walks, just to kill time. And again, it's not so much, I kind of fell out of love with it for a little while, just because it's not that I don't love competing, but it's that running when I was working was this break for me. It was what was keeping me sane. And then all of a sudden it was the only thing I had to do that day, for
Right.
a little while. I've since, started a coaching business and, have had other things on my plate, but, and do more things like this. And, but that first year was tough, and I just didn't know how to handle it. And then, so I ended up running too much. I ended up overtraining and had a bunch of health issues that year. And and then again, from my car accident, we're going to talk about injuries, and every run was painful. Even training for 2017, every run was painful. But because it was only my 1 hour and my only thing I had to do that day, my 1 hour of running, and then I taught, then it didn't matter how my run felt. But when my run felt terrible every single day, and that's the only thing I had to do every single day was run. It was, and also I can't afford PTs at this time because I'm only making a small ultra runner salary, you know.
Which is small.
Yeah, which is, I mean, funny enough, I'm making more. I made more as an ultra runner right off the bat as I did teaching, but I was not making a lot teaching at all. You know, I was living paycheck to paycheck for sure teaching, but like the just being in so much pain every single run and then having that be my only thing to think about was like, wow, again, you know, I was in a ton of pain, tons of nerve tension on my run, and I don't know what to do about it. I can't lift or do PT because I don't know how to do PT. I don't know how to do it by myself, and every time I do any kind of strength exercises, it aggravates my back. Yeah, so it was just a lot mentally, and like when runs hurt, you know, it really takes the joy out of it, and that's really what happened.
Did you feel a level of pressure, like a new sense of pressure?
You know, it wasn't ever pressure from sponsors, but it was pressure I was putting on myself. I almost felt like I was that high school girl again, going into a college, a collegiate program. You know, it was just a new step, and I felt like because even though I'd had all these results, and I was fast, and everyone, you know, who was around me wasn't surprised when I won Western, but because everyone was saying, you know, it came out of nowhere, it's a fluke, I did have the pressure. I was pissed. I was pissed that people, especially other women in the sport, were saying it was a fluke. Not women in Boulder who ran with me and knew me, but like other women who competed, you know, and it was just, I felt like I did have something to prove, just like I did, you know, as a freshman in college, and that sucked. And that says something that needs to change about the community. But I don't know, maybe all competitive communities are like that. So, but it definitely put a lot of pressure. It made me put a lot of pressure on myself because I was like, well, people are telling me I'm a fluke. I need to prove them wrong. And then meanwhile, I can't run for, you know, an hour without excruciating pain. And like, again, the people who run with me now and ran with me then are like, it's amazing to see you run and not have to stop every half mile, because when I wasn't racing, when I was training, and everyone in Boulder who ran with me will attest to this, I was having to stop every half mile because like the pain would get too great, and then I'd stop and I'd let it ease a little bit. I'd let it calm down, and then I'd get like another half mile and then have to stop for another couple minutes. It was crazy, and I'm just so grateful that I'm feeling better, and I'm grateful that I've got a better head on my shoulders, that I'm not putting so much stock in what my competitors say or think, you know, because that's unproductive, and it's too much airtime for people who are saying awful stuff.
Do you think there's a little bit more? Do you feel like on the women's side versus the men's side, there's a little bit more of I don't know, savage commentary amongst the competitors?
I think it might be getting better, but I've read a lot of studies, and I actually wrote an article for Trail Sisters that because women have had to fight for less spots in all aspects of life since, you know, at the beginning of time, we've had to fight for less opportunity, you know, there's less opportunity out there for women, and that's included in trail running. So understandably, it's going to be a more hostile environment, woman to woman. And some people might disagree with me. And honestly, I think maybe it's because I've really taken a step back, but I think it's gotten a lot better. But God, I do think that, you know, women in sports, it can be an incredibly hostile environment. And I experienced that in college, and I experienced that on the professional level, and even, you know, on amateur level. Like, I remember running the Bear 100, and some woman who was running with me, you know, looked at me, and we'd raced a few times, and she kind of knew who I was, looked at me. This is Bear 2015, where, you know, I wasn't a threat to anyone. And she looked at me and said, "What are you doing running up here with me?" And, you know, it's just stuff like that. It's ridiculous. And,
that is ridiculous.
And at that time, it fueled me. But, you know, when I'm, you know, have more ambitious goals and it did get to me for a little while. And, Ryan and I like to say, we live in Ned, we live at 8,500 feet in this little town above Boulder. And we like to say that we're above the bullshit because there's, in Ned, there's no athletes up here, there's not like a super tight knit running community that's hyper competitive. We just do our own thing. And I cannot tell you how freeing it's been to be around that commentary from, competitors and fellow runners, where it's always like, who's doing what? And so-and-so shouldn't be doing this, and so-and-so should be doing this, and so-and-so, needs to gain 5 pounds, and so-and-so needs to lose 5 pounds, it's so exhausting. And
right.
I just like both Ryan and I, who were so embedded in that community and, the running community as a whole, just exhausted, we were both burnt out on that. And so, we're so lucky to be living up here.
So you have this period where I don't know if burnout's the right term, but you definitely have lost a little pep in your step, for lack of a better term. And then someone beats your FKT, and you sort of get a little bit of a fire lit under your butt. Mm-hmm. What happens from there to going to attempting the FKT?
So, in the last couple years, my injuries come from, I got in a car accident in 2015 and broke my pelvis and broke my ribs and had a bunch of nerve damage in my back. And I never addressed it because, I was 23. I didn't have health insurance, couldn't afford anything. And it was, so I didn't address it. And then I came back to running too quickly. And since, the injuries have just, built up and built up and built up as I've gotten older. And they, after she got my FKT, I was training to go for it again, and I kept training, but God, I could only, and this has been true for the last, since Western States, is I'm only able to put, 3 good weeks of training, and then I have to take 3 weeks off because of, the incredible amount of pain I'm in. And then it's, 6 weeks of good training, and it's still not, it wasn't, right now I'm better than I have been in a long time. And I think it's because I've had to take a step back with coronavirus. A lot of my goals have been put on the back burner, but it was so frustrating, and I just wasn't able to get fit enough. And I kept trying to, I'd have to take time off, and then I'd get so frustrated that I felt like I wasn't doing enough, and I just want to, I'm so competitive and eager, and I just want to get back out there. So I pushed myself too fast, and I really haven't, had a good 12-week training block in a really long time. And so, I was supposed to go for it again. I finally thought I strung together good enough training to go for it again this spring, and with COVID, I of course couldn't. But I think so much of it is a blessing because I was pushing myself to get back too quickly again. And when things are good, they feel good. But when things are bad, I'm running out half a mile and limping home, crying and with terrible sharp pains in my back and my glutes and down my leg, and that's just all the nerve tension and from and nerve damage, and it's really it's really frustrating and hard. But I think I took 4 really good weeks off in February, and then maybe came back a little bit too fast, and then I took another really good 6 weeks of no pressure, getting out for mostly walks and spending a lot of time on the stationary bike when I felt like it. I'm finally, and, talking for people out there with injuries, I've been seeing a PT, and I have been for a few years, but you got to get one that listens to you. I've seen people who have been not even looking at my x-rays from before, not even looking at my running form, and just being do more single leg squats. And I'm like, dude, single leg squats are what aggravates my back the most. I can't. And so, finally I found a PT who's listening to me for the first time and, reviewed my x-rays and saw how I ran, and that's been made all the difference in running pain free. And then also just giving myself a break and not trying to run through the pain. Like anytime for years, I was running through awful pain, taking a ton of anti-inflammatories, and like even Ryan, my partner, discourages the use of anti-inflammatories, and I was being sneaky about it, because I didn't, I wanted to train, I felt like I had to train, and I didn't want him to see. So leading up into Tarawera, which I DNF'd, and I was taking a bunch of anti-inflammatories and stuff, and after trying to train again. And so I'm in a place now, I've had a few big weeks with no pain, which has been, actually no pain. I've thrown that out there a lot, but I'd say I'm for the first time really in no pain most of the time. And when I am in pain, I don't make myself run through it these days. And that has been, I think made all the difference. On days where my back flares up, I say not today.
Do you think that, as far as your physical therapy and getting back to some semblance of balance, just listening to your body more has been the biggest help in that?
Yeah, I think, there's been a few things that has been really helpful. It's been listening to my body, that when things hurt, when you're thinking about what hurts every single step, or thinking about how to step to make it not hurt every single step, then shut it down, and I wish I knew that for so long, but I didn't do it until really the last few months. And it has, it's frustrating because, sometimes you go out every day and you have to walk home. That was happening a lot. And then one week, I didn't have to walk home at any of my runs. And that was huge. So that's the first thing, listening to my body. And then also having a PT that listens to me. And, I feel like so many PTs, are clouded by what they think they know. And I'm not a doctor, but I've over the last 5 years since this accident, I've worked with a lot of PTs, and so many times I've left in tears, or I've been so hopeful when I've seen them for the first time, and then it's just been the same thing of them, not listening to me at all, treating symptoms and not the problem, telling me to do exercises when I tell them I do these exercises and I can't run the next day. They, either tell me I'm not doing enough of them or it'll get better, and it doesn't. And I think it's so important to have a professional that, the right one, the right one that listens and, makes you feel validated in what you're feeling. And doesn't make you feel like you're just a checkbox, that you're just an appointment, Right. Like I've had so many PTs that like this one that I'm talking about, I gave him 2 chances, and I went in once and he made me do like an hour single leg squats in this. And, it's my first time seeing him, and like the single leg squats, like I'm doing them and like I'm fighting back tears. I'm in so much pain. I try and tell him, he's like, keep doing them. He like walks away for half an hour, talking to someone else while I'm paying $110 an hour, to see him. And then a year later, my coach encourages me to go back to this same PT, and it's the same thing, single leg squats. And like, that's the number one thing that's been aggravating my back. And I've had, that, and again, like walks away halfway through the appointment. That's the only thing he tells me to do. And this other PT that I'm working with now, we've only done virtual stuff. And like, I've been like, okay, she sent me a list of exercises, and I'm like, this exercise really aggravates. This is what I'm feeling. And then she's like, oh, that makes sense. It's probably because of this, it gives me a reason, and then adjusts the plan. And that has been unbelievably helpful.
Nice. That is so cool. So what do you think as far as, as you go through training and you develop this layer of health, what if you had to pass on one aha moment to someone else who's struggling with an injury, what would that one aha moment be?
Gosh, that's so tough. Because I felt like I've had so many over the years, and they've just been false summits. If you know what I mean by that, like I feel like I have the solution, and then 2 days later it slips through my fingers. But I'd say, I don't know, talking to my new PT, her name's Sarah. She's in Boulder. She like having her just listen to me, and just that like it almost helped the next day, like after talking to her and having someone being like, yeah, your pain makes sense, like I'm looking at your x-rays, of course that's not going to heal, like your back is damaged, like we're going to take a really conservative approach like this, that was my, and just feeling like I wasn't in it alone, because like even when I'd CPTs and I still felt like I was in it alone, I still felt like they weren't invested in me. And that, find someone who's invested in you, and like if you feel like your PT's not doing enough, speak up, because it's their job to help you. And if you feel like you're not helping you, it's not your responsibility to please them or to keep your mouth shut. And I was doing that for so long and being like, well, I guess I'm not the professional, like I guess I'll listen to what they say. But they're not perfect, and we put so much stock in what they say so often that it can lead us down a rabbit hole of doing the wrong thing for years. And that's what happened to me. So
right,
find someone who's invested in you as much as you're invested in yourself.
Switching gears here for a second, let's get into some nuts and bolts. What about training? When you're feeling good, what does your week look like?
So right now I'm running, between 70 and 90 miles a week, which I think is my sweet spot. I'm, again, I'm kind of just tipping my toes in the water right now, because I don't know when my back's going to flare up. So I'm taking everything really, really slow and easy, and I'm putting no pressure on myself to do a run if anything hurts. But nuts and bolts, I train between, 12 and 20 hours a week. And that includes, 45 minutes of PT and yoga every day. That includes post-run mobility. I include all that stuff in my weekly, hours. I do, 1 to 2 harder runs a week, and then the rest are, something I've learned to help keep me injury, to keep my injury flare-ups less frequent, there's no such thing as too easy on easy days. The best Kenyan marathoners who run sub 5-minute pace, relatively comfortably, are doing their easy runs flat 9 to 11-minute pace, and like that. And I knew that fact. I'd read the studies, but I was still like, maybe even though the effort felt easy, it was just, my musculoskeletal system couldn't keep up with that effort, even if my cardiovascular system couldn't. So I was really beating myself up. So like anyone listening out there, there's no such thing as too easy on easy days. That's how you can, that's the only way you can get the most out of your hard days. And honestly, if you are finding yourself, if you're like, man, I have a bunch of these niggles, my lower legs hurt all the time, then I almost, 50% of that, I bet, is people running their easy runs too fast.
Yep. I think that's some really good advice. What about diet?
So I just started working with a nutritionist after my Tarawara DNF to like help reach specifically targeted pain and inflammation reduction, and that has gone a huge way. I don't have a super strict diet. My nutritionist was kind of appalled at the amount of processed foods I eat. Like I eat a ton of chips. I've gotten better, but a ton of chips, chips where I could be eating chickpeas and stuff like that. Chips for dinner when I should be eating a sweet potato or a bowl of rice. And so it's gotten a lot better. But I have celiac disease, which means I can't eat gluten. But that's the only restriction I have.
Okay. And so, what advice, if there was a young runner out there, a young 18-year-old cat who wanted to get into ultra running and turn it into a career, what advice would you give on the career front, sponsorships and that kind of thing?
I would say don't put all your eggs in that basket right now, but still keep the dream alive and work hard. Get a job, get something that keeps you occupied and motivated. Because even now, as a pro ultra runner, I'm only happy when I'm constantly busy. I'm coaching constantly. I have other obligations. I write and edit for a publication. So don't put all your eggs in the ultra running basket, because as wonderful as it is, it's not, if that's all you're doing, it's not fulfilling work. So go to school, or, if you don't want to, go to a university, find a specialty that you want to do, but still keep that dream alive. Still train and believe you can be, that professional ultra runner. I think so much of it is like me telling Lewis, like, I will get that FKT. I had no reason to think I could do that. I hadn't been running, the FKT at the time was 8 hours, and we'd done it that day in 16 hours a day that I said I was going to get the FKT. So like, keep that dream alive, but man, it sure helps your happiness when you're also, doing something else or have another passion. I've really, I love teaching, but as a coach, like, I think, I found what I was made to do. And like, coaching, although running is my passion, and like, I find it so fulfilling. And if I don't get out every day, if I don't get out and run 5 days a week, then, I definitely go a little insane. But coaching is what fulfills me. Coaching, Ryan knows every single one of my athletes, just like he knew every single one of my students. I get just excited talking about them as I get excited talking about, my projects, or more excited a lot of times. And, everyone needs something like that. It doesn't have to be coaching. It can be, painting, or it can be writing, or it can be engineering, or whatever. But I think to be a successful ultra runner, to be successful at a lot of things, you need something else.
Right. You need that balance.
Yeah, exactly.
What the sport of ultra running as a whole, where do you see it at right now? Like the positives and the negatives, and where do you see it going?
I think there's so much positive. I think it's like, the community is unmatched. People are generally welcoming. I think we're experiencing some growing pains right now with the introduction of, more sponsorship money, and which, I don't think is a bad thing at all. I think things are just getting figured out, and how it's going to work, and how brands are going to support pros, and how races are going to support pros. But I don't have a whole lot of bad things to say about ultra running, other than maybe pick up your damn gel wrappers off the trail. If you poop in the woods, bury it.
What about people who leave their dogs' poop bags on the side of the trail?
As long as they pick it back up, it's fine. But if they just leave it there, you're not doing anything better by, leaving the poop in the bag. Because your bag's compostable doesn't mean it's going to compost right there on the trail. It has to be processed. And I just think if runners can encourage other runners to be more responsible and respectful, and I think, that's the thing. I think as the sport grows and people realize how special it is, we are going to get, the sport's going to gain more stewards of the trail, people who care. But I hope it doesn't turn into, when people run on a track, they're not thinking about the condition of the track. They're thinking about, how can I throw down the fastest time? And I hope that doesn't turn into, and although while I respect throwing down the fastest time possible on trails occasionally, I hope that's not all the trail gives, the newcomers in the sport. I hope there is also, you see the trail as what it is. It's a gift. And while a track is awesome, being outside in the woods gives you so much more, and you can't treat it with that, disregard that you can a track. So I just hope that, newcomers, respect and love the mountains and the trails, as much as the community has been rooted in, if that makes sense.
You mentioned just a second ago on how events and the professional athletes, the interaction there. What were you referencing as part of your Growing Pains comment?
You mean like brand supporting athletes and things?
Yeah, brands supporting athletes and how events support athletes and that interaction. Specifically, what were you talking about?
Like a professional marathoner, the marathon will pay an athlete to go. And I think that's going to have to happen. The best marathon, and I'm not saying ultra running has to get to this point anytime soon, but I'm thinking, just the best in the world, and I'm not saying I'm one of them. I'm saying, I'm as much of a fan of the sport as I am a competitor, and I want to see the best in the world line up and race each other. And I think for that to happen, a lot of times, races are going to have to start, supporting athletes to get in. It's going to have to be part, not only, their entry. Sometimes if you're lucky, you'll get a ticket into the race, but also doing appearance fees. Like, I know some of the top professional marathoners will get tens of thousands of dollars to go race, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to go race a marathon. And while I don't think ultra running should be there yet, I think it'll encourage, less hostility in the sport. And not that there's a ton, but they're definitely like amongst the the small pool of elites, there definitely is. And I think that might reduce if there's, if more people can make a living off the sport. And I think races supporting athletes is a huge part. I think brands have a lot of catching up to do supporting women as much as they support men. I think the sport really needs to diversify. And part of that is brands supporting all types of athletes across the board, not just, what looks best in a magazine or, what the market thinks it looks best in the magazine. So I think there's a lot of growing pains that brands and athletes and races have to do.
Right. There seems to be a disproportionate amount of dollars that the brands are going, that it's not making its way to the athletes. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And when it does make it to the athlete, it's disproportionately white men. Disgustingly, and white women too, but especially white men. It's still, women are getting paid way less than the highest paid male athlete. And that's not okay. And it's not okay that, across the board, men and women, it's one demographic. I would like to see way more diversity in the sport across cultures and people. And I think it'll definitely, make the sport more competitive, and that's the only way we're going to grow it is by brands supporting all people across all sanctions.
Yeah. The events athletes are such an important ecosystem for any industry, outdoor industry. It's almost like they're pulling, it's like they're just taking too many trees out of the forest where the forest can't quite thrive. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, definitely.
I've seen that in several different outdoor sports over time. Mm-hmm. What's the rest of your 2020 year look like? What are obviously you're at some point looking to give this FKT on the Rim to Rim trails. Are any other things on your horizon?
I just got my last race canceled, so I'm gonna, look at the calendar and figure some stuff out. I definitely have some projects in the work that I'm not quite ready to announce, but we'll stay tuned.
Nice. Is there anything else that I didn't cover on this interview that you'd want to share with our listeners?
all I gotta say is take care of the places and the people that take care of you. That means no trash in the trail. Don't step off trail. Respect where you are. There's a reason the established trails are where they are, especially in high alpine places. We don't want to disrupt, these really delicate environments, and respect other athletes out there. It's the only way we're going to grow the sport. Just be respectful. Pick up your trash, smile at other athletes, do the right thing when you're, even when no one's looking out on the trail.
Where can our listeners follow you and especially learn more about your coaching program? Are you taking on other athletes right now?
Yeah, I'm taking on a few athletes. I have a few open spots right now. If you find me at Cat Berad on Instagram, that's CATBERAD, or give me an email at chbradley91@gmail.com. That's the best place to reach me as a coach, and or catberad.com. I have a little, coaching. I'm not very good at technology, so I apologize. My website's simple.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to bring you back on the show when you get another shot of this at this FKT at the
Awesome.
Grand Canyon. I've made 8 trips down that river, and it's such an amazing place.
It really, really is. It definitely a piece of my heart over there.
Hey, one more thing before I let you go. Have you ever thought about or heard of any of the folks who have done the hiked the entire Grand Canyon from the bottom to the top within the rim?
Yeah, I have, and that, man, I have so many dream projects, and that, it's quite the undertaking in a way that no other project is, because it's so desolate, for so long. But it's certainly, quite a feat for anyone who's done it.
Yeah, I mean, it's 800 miles. It's, I don't know how many thousands of feet of vertical. There's days where you're struggling to find water. There's a very interesting online article. I'll put it in the show notes to some guys who actually did it. One guy was Pete McBride. I can't think of the other guy's name. But I know I'm not Lewis, but I'm just going to go ahead and challenge you to that one. I'm going to plant it in your ear.
It's definitely in there, but we'll see. It's certainly something I've been looking at. So,
well, Kat, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been great talking to you.